This exercise introduces you to the minimum, maximum, and vertical lookup functions. We'll need to use these functions to complete the following tax table for calculating a corporation's tax liability. Recall our federal tax rates are progressive. In other words, as our taxable income increases, so does our marginal tax rate. These are the tax rates from Table 2.4 of your textbook. We're going to go ahead and calculate the total taxes due, the average tax rate, and the marginal tax rate for a company with $90,000 in taxable income. As we go through, notice if you see any red triangles and you move the mouse over those cells, you can see an actual comment. Keep that in mind on worksheets that you're working on. All right, if we had $90,000 in income, the first $50,000 will be taxed at a 15% tax rate. So we would assign it to this 15% bracket. The next 25,000 would be taxed at a 25% tax rate, and we would assign it to this bracket. The final 15,000 is taxed at the 34% rate. And if we added these numbers up, and again, we can sum those up, equals sum, and then highlight the range we want to add up. There's our full $90,000 in income. We can go ahead and calculate the taxes due. And our taxes due would simply be the marginal tax rate multiplied by the income that's in that particular bracket. And I can then take that, and I want to copy that down. I can line the crosshair up with the small square in the right-hand corner and drag it down. And then finally, I can add these numbers up, equals sum. Highlight the cells I'm interested in, cells H16 through H23, enter, and there are my total taxes due. My average tax rate would simply be my equal to the taxes due divided by my corporate taxable income of $90,000. I have a 20.9% average tax rate. My marginal tax rate, I'm going to make use of Excel's lookup function to calculate my marginal tax rate. The lookup function has three parts. It looks up a value. In this case, I'm going to want to look up my $90,000 in taxable income. Then it looks it up in a range. I'm going to want to look it up in this tax rate table. And then finally, it has an offset, and I'm going to want to pick up the marginal tax rate, which is in the third column of this particular range. So let's go ahead and use that. I'm going to use the function wizard, and I can either start typing my function or I can go straight to the FX button, FX, and the types of functions I can choose from, most recently used all, financial, date and time, statistical. This one is on lookup and reference. And I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom, and there's my VLOOKUP. And I'm going to hit OK. Now I've got a table here, and I'm going to want to look up what value. I'm going to want to look up my taxable income, which is in cell E10. I'm going to want to look it up in this tax rate table, which is cells E16 through G23. And I'm going to want to pick up my marginal tax rate, which is in the third column of that table. And I can hit OK. So there's my 34% marginal tax rate. Now the trouble with my table so far is it works for $90,000 in taxable income, but if I were to change it to say 1.5 million in taxable income, nothing in my table changes because I calculated these manually rather than using a formula. Let's go ahead now and look at the formula we might use to come up with that amounts of 50, 25, and 15. The first step we're going to do is we want to compare our taxable income, which is in that cell E10, with the income bracket, which in this case is our $50,000 bracket for the first one. The next one's going to be a $25,000, and then a $25,000, and then a $235,000 bracket. So we want to compare our income in cell E10 to the bottom part of our bracket, which is in column E. So let's go ahead and enter a formula for that. Equals E10. Now notice I had dollar signs in front of the E and dollar signs in front of the 10 because I want to make this an absolute cell reference. I'm going to copy this formula down, and I don't want the column or the row to change. So you can put dollar signs manually in front of the E, manually in front of the 10, or if you have a PC rather than a Mac platform computer, hitting the F4 key, the function key, F4, cycles $signs through. So I want an absolute cell reference, and then I want to subtract the amount in column E. So there's my 90,000, and I'm going to copy that on down. Now notice, the first 90,000 could go to this bracket. Once I've allocated 50, I only have 40 left, and I allocate 25 there, and I have 15 left, but the negative numbers I can do without. So what could we do to get rid of these negative numbers? That brings us to step 2. I'm going to take the lesser of the amount that we just calculated in column A, the 90, 40, or the 15, and the difference, or the tax bracket here. 50 minus 0 is 50, 75 minus 50 is 25. So basically I want to compare this to the amounts of income for each one of these brackets. So I'm going to take the lesser of the tax bracket, or the amount we have in column A. To do that, I'm going to make use of Excel's min function. Equals min, parenthesis, and at this point I can hit the function wizard if I want, and it'll pop up the box, and I wanted to take the lesser of the amount in column B, comma, or I said the difference between these, which was column F minus column E. I don't want the full 90,000 to be taxed. I only want 50 of it. The lesser of the difference between these two, or the 90. The lesser. Problematic here. I don't want to have negative amounts that I'm going to calculate my tax on. So that brings me to step 3. And I'm going to take the maximum of the amount in column 2, or column C here, and 0. So I want to take the maximum of column C or 0. And to do that, I'm going to use Excel's max function. Again, I can type it in directly or use the function wizard. This happens to be a statistical function, and if I didn't know, I could look in all and scroll down and find it. So in statistical, coming down to max, hit OK. The first number was the amount we had in column C, and the second number we said was simply 0. Hit OK, and now I can copy that down, and I have actually calculated the amount of taxable income for each one of these brackets. And if I were to change income to 1.5 million, sure enough, income would be allocated across. I could calculate the total taxes due, my average tax rate, and my marginal tax rate. The next thing we're going to do, I'm going to put this back to 90,000, is we're going to consider how we would incorporate steps 1, 2, and 3 into a single formula. And that's what we have right here. Notice we have taken the maximum of the minimum of some different things. So we're going to go through this on a step-by-step basis. All right, I've got my tax rate table tab set next to my tax rate step-by-step. Let's go ahead and consider that first step we had. And again, the first step was simply taking the difference between our taxable income and the amount in column E. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that, and that again was the bottom of our tax bracket. So equals, anchor it, minus the lower part of our tax bracket. Okay, so now we have the amounts that we had, remember, here in column 1. The next step then was we were taking the minimum of either the amount in column B or the difference in our tax brackets. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. We already have column B, and we just need to take the minimum between it and something else. So coming in the front here, equals minimum, parenthesis. Here was our first number. Let's follow it with a comma. And then we were simply, for the second one, we were going to take the difference between our two tax brackets, the top and the bottom of it. Close parenthesis, hit enter. And I'm going to copy that down. Now notice I have the amounts here that we would have had in step 2, the 50, 25, 15, negative 10, 245, and 9, 10. Finally, let's move on and incorporate step 3. And for step 3, recall, we were taking the maximum between the amount we had just calculated right here and 0. So let's go back to our formula. Go right in front of the equal sign, MAX. Here was the amount we just calculated, and we want to take the maximum between that and 0. Close parenthesis, hit enter, and I can copy it on down. And now I've got a formula that again will work with any amount of taxable income, and it's the same thing we got here with a slightly more complex or messy worksheet. It's just visually it looks a little bit better, and we can spread that out, and again we can see all of our amounts change, fully flexible for any amount of income.